Check out my new pack out attachment. It's part of the new Milwaukee pack out set. Should be available soon. Has all my power tools in there. Basically like a junk drawer of tools, but it works for us. We can get the stuff out as we need it, and then we just throw this in the back of the truck. I really like this pack out stuff. I've tried the rigid set, I've tried the DeWalt tough system, and finally landed on this and went all out on it. It's great stuff, super tough. So you guys know I like talking about tools. Like many of you, I have an addiction, and it's not one that I try to fight. I just embrace it. You know, I go with the addiction. Unless I'm dealing with my wife, then, you know, we kind of have some fights back and forth. She doesn't think I need all this stuff. She said, you were doing fine without that tool. You didn't need that tool. And I'm like, no, look, this is what it does. Like, I just bought this $1,400 pocket hole cutter. She's like, well, don't you have that little blue thing with the drill? I'm like, yeah, but it's just not, it doesn't work good anymore. So I'll be making a video on that pocket hole cutter as well. It's pretty cool. I'm pretty pumped up about it. Should be here in 2 weeks. But anyways, I want to talk to you guys today about a blade. The miter saw is probably the tool that we use the most, being trim carpenters. So the blade on this thing is pretty important, and since I've been making some videos, like the last video on this miter fence right here, this new upgrade, and then I gave some miter saw tips in a couple videos back, people have been seeing the blade and asking like, well, what blade is that you're using? Because in that other video I was saying, hey, you need a good sharp blade. Just as long as it's sharp, you'll be able to do good work. So I wanted to answer that question, what blade are we currently running, and talk to you about some of the theories and just what goes on in my mind and why I like to use this specific blade that we're using. So this blade right here is an FS tool, LM6300. I'll leave a link in the description if you want to get one of these, but you can see that right there, FS tool, not to be mistaken with Festool. There's no E right there. So what does that stand for? I don't know. This blade was just recommended to me, and I just call it the Diablo killer because it's the blade that made me stop buying Diablo blades, and I'll get into why. Maybe I will buy another Diablo blade eventually. I'm not bashing Diablo. I think they're great blades. We used them for like 6 years straight. So again, FS tool, LM6300 is the part number. 12-inch miter saw blade, 100 tooth, industrial carbide tipped saw blade. So why are we using this, and how did this come about? Well, this actually came about, is recommended to me by a guy on a job site, cabinet maker, saying, hey, you should try out this blade, because he saw me with the Diablo. And if a cabinet maker tells you something, you kind of want to pay attention, because a lot of those guys are legit and they really know what they're talking about. And I saw some of the work he was doing, and I was like, all right, I'll give it a shot. And then also people in the comments of some of our videos have been recommending this blade. Also, there's another one I want to try. I think it's called a Forest Chop Master. So again, this isn't sponsored. Guys, I'm not sponsored by anybody. So let's just get that out of the way. I have no sponsorships whatsoever. No one wants to help me out for some reason. No, I'm just kidding. I've had people approach me with stuff, and I'm like, you know what? I'll just be the average guy and I'll just buy the stuff too. So this blade, yeah, we got this recommended, and this is something that I'm willing to try, and I gave it a shot. And this is our second one now. We've been running this for about 8 months. So a blade can last us about 3 to 4 months per blade, because we're cutting a lot of soft materials. I spoke about that in my miter saw tip video. We're not cutting a bunch of hardwoods. We can make a blade last pretty long, unless we're cutting through a foam beam and then we hit one of those dang screws. That will ruin your blade really quick. So if you're gonna cut foam beams, side note, just throw a crappy blade on there anyways, maybe one of your old blades, because those foam beams are annoying. They look good, but they're really annoying to work with. So now that we're back off that rabbit trail, this blade right here, the reason I like to use it, the number one reason, it's super sharp, number one. very, very sharp. Like, will actually, it feels like there's razor blades on the end of those teeth. And when you're handling this blade, you can feel like it wants to puncture your skin when you take it out of the package. So if you guys do want to get one of these, just obviously when you're handling a blade, be careful. But it does feel extremely sharp. And I would say this next point is kind of tied with number one, and that is it's a thicker blade. So the Diablos, I have some over here that we were using before. They are a 1/16 of an inch thick, roughly. So I'm just measuring this with my tape measure. I'm not getting into the decimals and everything like that. So these are about a 1/16 of an inch thick. So looking at it like this. This blade that we're currently running, this FS tool, is double this thickness. So with the FS tool blade, I got an old one right here too. And here's an old Diablo. I brought these along because I knew we would have time to make this video. So this is the same exact blade that's currently on this miter saw right here. This is just an older one that's dull that I wish I could sharpen because they're expensive, but I'll explain that in a minute. So looking at these two blades, like I mentioned, this one's a 1/16 of an inch thick, and then this one is about an 1/8 of an inch thick. So what that does, and this is how it works in my mind, is if you have a thin piece of metal, like any kind of metal, we're not just talking about blades here, but any kind of metal, and these are essentially just pieces of metal. The thinner the metal is, the easier it is going to be to bend. So, you know, I can kind of flex this thing a little bit, but you know, you're not going to be able to pick that up on camera really, but I can kind of flex this thing a little bit. So a 1/16 of an inch and then an 1/8 of an inch. There's no way I'm flexing this thing. And essentially what you're cutting with here, and like I mentioned in my miter saw tip video from a couple videos back, the brand and all that, it doesn't matter. This is just a personal preference and what we're using now. We may change in the future. But essentially what you're cutting with here is two of these blades, because 2/16 make up an 1/8. So essentially that's what this blade is. Those 2/16 making up that 1/8. And then trying to bend these two together is like trying to bend that. It's just not going to happen. It's a thicker piece of metal. Since this thing won't bend as much, it's going to have less deflection. And deflection is whenever your blade is basically wobbling as it's cutting through material. It's deflecting left and right instead of just cutting true and straight. So when you're cutting, you just want that perfectly up and down motion with the blade. You don't want it to be like this, digging its way through the material. And it's not going to be, you know, I'm exaggerating it right here. It's not going to be that extreme, but just a little bit of a minimal back and forth, it is going to make a difference on finish work when pieces are coming together. So you're going to get less of that with a thicker blade, whether it's this brand or whatever other brand you want to use. So this right here is kind of our progression of blades. Kind of got the basic blade that comes with the saw in the box, and it's actually not this blade. This is actually a DeWalt fine finish blade. We would run general construction blades back in the early days, and just, hey, they were cheap and they cut wood, so why not? Then once we jumped up to the Diablos, we did see a pretty good improvement in the quality of the cut. And then now using these blades for like the last 8 months, it's an even bigger improvement over the Diablos. So I would kind of label these as good, better, best. So there's no bad. Again, it's just good, better, best. All of these are good to go, but for what we do, this is the best option for us. And it's kind of starting to rain a little bit, and you guys wanted me to build a miter station out of wood. See, it just wouldn't have worked. So it's gonna sound ironic, I don't like building things. I just don't. It sounds weird. I like to buy the tools, and I like them to be metal. I don't like using wood for anything, and this is one of the reasons why. The weather's been kind of like this all day. So I don't know, I'm just going off on all these rants now, but let me know if you have any questions about these blades. Oh yeah, one other thing, this right here, since it is about double the thickness of this blade, it's going to be double the cost too. So these blades you can get for like 90 bucks. This is gonna be 180 bucks. So I think it's worth it, I really do, for the quality of the cut that you'll see. And you'll feel the quality of the cut. Anyways, let me know if you have any other questions about any other tools. Should have some actual project videos coming up soon. But hey, I'm all for talking about tools all day long. So, and if you guys see us when you're driving by, stop and say hi. You know, I like when people do that. It's pretty cool. But other than that, we'll catch you guys on the next one. We gotta clean all this up. We're wrapping up, and I don't want that rain to get any worse. We'll see you on the next one.